This is section 3.2, graphing linear equations in two variables. We are building on what we just did in the last section. We talked about completing ordered pairs there. We talked about plotting some points. Now we're going to kind of put all of this together. This first problem, they want us to complete the ordered pairs, and they've given us 3 of them. And then they want us to plot it and then graph the equation. Okay, so what is all of this that we have to do? This one says, remember it's always x and then y. This one's saying I need to plug in 0 for x and see what I get for y. Well, that would be y is equal to 0 minus 2, and 0 minus 2 is negative 2. So the number that should go in this ordered pair is negative 2. Let's go ahead and plot that point. This needs to line up with 0 on the x-axis. I'm going to put 5 and 10 on here. Just so that it's easy to tell where we are. Okay, so now let's plot the point 0, negative 2. We go to 0 on the x-axis. Remember, this is the x, this is the y. And then we need to go to negative 2 on the y-axis. Negative 2 is here. We need to line up with 0 on the x and negative 2 on the y, which is that point right there. What I know right now is that the line that is my answer passes through this point. It could go like this, it could go like this, I don't know yet. But I know it passes through that point because this is one of the infinite solutions to this equation. Okay, so let's come back and let's try this one. This one's telling us to plug in 0 for y. So that will give me 0 is equal to x minus 2. To find x, I need to move the 2 over here, so I add 2 to both sides. To get that, 2 is equal to x. So a 2 will go in that position. Let's plot this point. 2, 0. I line up with 2 on the x-axis and 0 on the y, which gives me this point right here. Okay, now 2 points is technically enough to draw a line. I could just use my ruler here, draw my line. I've got an answer. Now the thing is, you can draw a line through any 2 points. And if one of these 2 points is wrong, my line is definitely wrong. That's why we often graph 3 points, because it's much harder to get 3 points to line up than it is to get 2. So that third point kind of works as insurance. If all 3 points don't line up, I've made a mistake somewhere, I need to go find it. Here we're being asked to plug in 5 for x. Okay, so that would be y equals x minus 2, x is 5, minus 2, which would be 3. So that tells me the point 5, 3 is also on my line. So I go to 5 on my x-axis. I'm going to be lined up with it somewhere. You can use a ruler if you want to. I'm lined up somewhere here. And then I go to 3 on the y, which is here. Where do they line up? This point right here. Now, do all 3 of these points line up? Yes. Draw your line. And you have solved this equation. Remember, we solve linear equations in 2 variables by graphing them because they have infinite solutions, but it's not everything. Now, what this means is that every single point on this line, if I knew this precise fraction right there, I could plug it in and it would work. But if I plug in this point right here, it's not going to work. Infinite, but not everything. Okay, so let's try another one of these. So we're again asked to plug in some values. This time we have a fraction. Don't let it scare you. And basically we're doing the same thing. We're going to plug in 0 for y, 0 for x. We plug in zeros a whole lot, and there's a very good reason for that we'll get to in a minute. And here I'm going to plug in 1/2 for y. Starting off with this one, my y value is 0. So x is equal to 2 times 0 plus 3. 2 times 0 is 0, so that goes away. 0 plus 3 is just 3. So my x is 3 here. Okay, now let's plot the point 3, 0. I go to 3 on my x-axis, which is here, and go to 0 on my y. And that means this point right here is one of my points on my line. Now let's come deal with x equal to 0. If x is 0, then I have 2y plus 3. I need to solve this, so I need to subtract 3 from both sides. And I get negative 3 is equal to 2y. Divide both sides by 2. And I get negative 3 halves. And I could put negative 3 halves right here and it would be perfectly okay. Now the thing is though, we've got to plot this. So you might want to either, let me start over again. If you're graphing by hand, we would do an approximation here and we would draw a point and we'd make sure that it at least looks right. On the computer though, sometimes it automatically lets you graph on the halves and sometimes it doesn't. I'll talk to you in just a second about how to fix that. But let's go ahead and estimate this point. Negative 3 halves. If you want to use your calculator, because we're going to be estimating where to put this anyway, just do negative 3 divided by 2. Negative 3 halves is negative 1.5. Okay, so let's plot this point. We go to 0 on the x-axis, which is here, negative 1.5 on the y. So 0 on the x, negative 1.5. That's going to be about right there. Okay, now a quick thing before we go on to do this one. If you're graphing on the computer in MyMathLab, you'll pick the line tool and you just draw a random line. Okay, if you've got fractions and you want to do it, just draw some random line. And then you would click on the points that you drew. I'd click on, say, this one. Then I would have a pop-up that says enter coordinates. I could click on that and then I could type in the points I need. This is going to be the best way for you to graph fractions in the program. So if I drew a random line and I wanted to change it to this, I would click a point and say change enter coordinates. I would change it to 0, negative 3 halves, and it would plot it perfectly for me. Let's finish this up by plugging in 1/2 for y. This gives me x is equal to 2 times 1/2 plus 3. Okay, that's 2 over 1. When you multiply here, your 2's go away. Those are reciprocals, so x is equal to 1 plus 3, which is 4. So a 4 should go in this position. 4 on the x would be here. 1/2 on the y is right here. So these 2 points are really close together. And I've had to estimate on 2 of them, but these should line up, and they do. So you would draw your line in, and every single point on this line is a solution to the equation.